Well, TR Night Genius Season 2 with Picasso is now airing on NatGeo. You're one of the only people back from Season 1. Of course, not playing the same character at all, not nearly at all. Tell us about getting the call that you were going to be one of the only ones invited back.
Well, I think there's more. There's because Samantha Colley and Seth Gable and Johnny Flynn. But there's a handful of us, or a little more than a handful of us, I think, who are back. Edward Stoppard is back. So, I mean, it's so rare that that happens, where you get to pass by the audition process and are invited back, in that kind of feeling where, I don't know, that whatever you bring to something, that's requested again, you feel, it's like being invited back to a party that you really liked going to, except on a much bigger scale and a much better scale than that. I don't mean to minimize it by saying that terrible metaphor, but it's a feeling that these people are really kind. They're, I think, brilliant. Their work ethic is incredible, because the schedule is quite intense, and to be among them, to be a part of them, and one of the kind of moving parts in that, it's I don't know, it's a very special feeling that is not very common, and it makes you feel very lucky to be asked back.
Are you already trying to lobby and figure out who you could play in the Mary Shelley?
Mary, please, Mary. No, I don't know. That's an awkward question for an awkward person, because yeah, that's not up to me. So I'm going to plead the fifth. Like some other people recently.
My whole life, well, not my whole life, but certainly since high school, Ron Howard and Brian Grazer have been a team and producing some of the greatest movies in the world. What is it about them and their production company Imagine that they're doing right, that they do so well?
Well, like, what makes the quality?
What is it about the two of them that you've noticed makes for a good production?
I think it's the whole company. I think it's from my from just the actor standpoint, it's all of the people. It's both of those gentlemen. It's Francine. It's Anna. And it's just it's all of these entities assembling amazing people. So you've got Imagine working with Ken Viller and the team that he's created, and so you have Matthias, who directed this episode. I directed 2 episodes as well this season, but is also the DP, and his team that he's assembled, the camera team, Delevingne Lamont, and the prosthetic and makeup department team that they assembled. So it kind of is just, I don't know what the word is, but they all assemble these amazing teams, and then I think then you just focus on the work. And also what I found, just selfishly as an actor, because that's really, unfortunately, the only, my focus, all that other stuff is way above my pay grade, as they say, but it's to be a part of that kind of ensemble that has come back, both acting and crew and writers. It's you get this wonderful sense of support. Safety is maybe a better word, so that it kind of allows you, or allows me anyway, to feel more comfortable, more safe to risk, more safe to make a fool out of yourself, more safe? I don't think I'm speaking in correct English, sorry. But anyway, it makes you feel, it feels like it improves you. I don't know how else to describe that at this moment. And it's exciting. And because I feel like, at least for me, when I feel comfortable, when I feel, that's when you can try things, and you can, I don't know, for lack of a better word, like be riskier, and that's exciting. That's an exciting feeling to have coming to set, and having that sense of kind of dangerous play, actor dangerous play. I don't mean it in like the, I'm aware of what we do and everything, but and that's exciting to me.
This season's focused on Pablo Picasso as the genius. And you play Max Jacob.
Yes.
Tell us how Max Jacob interacts and is part of Pablo Picasso's world.
Max was one of the first people that, and definitely first friends that Pablo had when he moved to Paris in the early 1900s. Max is about 5 years older than Pablo Picasso. He is a poet, or was a poet, and a writer of prose. He was a painter. He was an art critic. To support himself, he graduated law school actually. So he was a law clerk to support himself. A shop sweeper, a nursemaid. He was in love with Picasso, and he loved him both. He was tortured by his sexuality, but he also, in part, he was very conflicted in that he was born of a middle-class Jewish family, and at the age of 33, he had a vision of Jesus, which I think, with all due respect to Mr. Jacob, I think it was very interesting that it was 33 when he had that vision. Then he converted to Catholicism, and Pablo was his godfather. But then he didn't, it was only 7 years later that he kind of removed himself from his life in Paris and lived in a monastery, kind of took himself away from life to, in essence, punish himself. Living in a cell in a monastery, and but then that was like for around 7 years, and then he went back to Paris and resumed his life, and then around 7 years later, he went back then to the monastery. He and stayed there until the Nazis took him in when he was 67 in 1944. He died en route at a prison before he got to the actual concentration camp. He died of pneumonia. But what I love about, I didn't know anything about Max. I know he's well known in France, but I, due to my lack of education or just missing him, I knew nothing about him. So when Ken Biller talked to me about playing him this season, to be able to dive into that research of who he was and his work and his writings, and to see a very exciting life, a very sad life, someone who could be insanely selfish but insanely generous, who could be hilarious and mean-spirited, full of passion and full of life and full of lust and then full of self-hate. And he talks in his later writings of looking at himself from every angle and only seeing helplessness and illness and sin and weakness. He's incredibly complicated, and as an actor, I know that word is used, so it's a cliched word, right? But to be able to, in a story about, your hero Picasso, to be able to, that Ken and the writers devoted so much time to Max and his relationship and where he was in his relationship with Picasso, is one of those rare things, at least in my life, that you're just very lucky to be the beneficiary of this writing and the commitment to show him as in all of his glory and then all of the ugliness and sadness in his life as well. And it's just, it's hard to talk about without feeling, I don't know, I feel like I'm talking way too much, sorry, but it's that feeling of...
you grew very attached to him, it seems.
You do, because you want to do right by him, you know, you want to do to, you know, his memory, to his spirit, to what he went through, to the torture that he put himself through, but it all starts with the writing, and it all starts with the writers and Ken Biller and Imagine making a commitment to focusing on him as much as they did, and that kind of complex, wonderful, loving relationship that's full of jealousy and selfishness and just nuts. It's just so complicated and so many layers of love and so many layers of frustration and disappointment that happens in a lifelong friendship, because they were friends, even though there's a lot of ups and downs. They were friends until he was taken away. Now, Picasso didn't sign in the story, and they talk about this too in Genius in later episodes, that you know, Cocteau tried to get Picasso to sign the letter to save Max from the Nazis, essentially, and Picasso didn't sign it, and they have their take on it in this show, but there's no question there was a lot of fear, and in a way that I don't think we can imagine, anyone alive who didn't live through it could imagine, about what it meant to have the Nazis in power and that fight for survival. But for whatever reason, he didn't sign it, and he was taken away. But you almost have that feeling that, as terrible as that must have been for him, there is maybe a bit of gratitude that he did not witness the camps. Yeah.
Antonio Banderas.
Yes.
He's
Plays Picasso.
He's had such a great career, but boy, this is one of his best roles ever, and just born to play this man. What's he like working with?
I luckily got to work with him because because you got the 10 hours, you got most of Max's life. The focus on it is during Picasso's younger life, so that's with Alex Rich.
Right.
But I got to have a scene with Antonio as the older Max and the older Picasso. So it's just, again, one of the joys of getting to work these 2 seasons on Genius, to get to age for 40 years. And you know, you don't do that alone. You do that with Delevingne and Tosh and Jordi and Joran and Flores and just all these talented prosthetic and makeup people. So I have to include them because because you sit for 7 hours in a chair aging until 67, and that is part of you. That is part of who you create, who you help create. What, you know, it's the metaphor is like the relay stick. I'm not a sports person, so I don't even know if it's called a relay stick, but you know, relay teams,
Passing
right?
a baton.
Baton. There you go.
There you go.
So embarrassing, but yeah, that's how much I know about sports. You spend 7 hours getting to watch them create and age you, and that does something. It does something to you. And also there's the wanting to not mess up their work in the way of, you know, bringing your very best to it. And then there's Antonio as well, who, with what was on his plate, the load that he had to bear for playing Picasso, or the older Picasso, it was just one brief scene with him for me, but he couldn't have taken the time out to be more generous and more kind and protective in a way, in such beautiful kind of subtle ways that that made it actually fun to explore what that older relationship is like after people have been through so much together, and all that kind of mishigas that happens in life, and all that, you know, the unrequited love, and the what has been said and what has not been said, and then to have this moment of two people that you get a little taste of that love that has still kept them connected. And again, it's the writing and Antonio who, you know, get the credit for that, because it's everything seems to fall into place when you have everybody caring about something. Everything seems to fall into place really well.
Well, let me ask you a couple of questions on your career.
Okay, I'm gonna take
yeah, go ahead, sure. Going back to Grey's Anatomy, that show continues to run. Someday it's going to wind down. If they figured out a way to bring...
I don't know.
Every show winds down eventually. Let's just say it was a final season and they figured out a way to bring back a bunch of these departed characters for an episode or something. Would you be up for that?
But George is departed.
No, that's what I mean. I know there's a bunch of them, though.
Oh, yeah. You know, yeah. If there's whatever, yes, Shonda, if there's a way, I oftentimes joke that there's like, if there's a purgatory hospital, you know, if she calls me up, I'll be there. But I don't know how that would be, but again, I don't have her mind, and if there is something that, you know, that she thinks makes sense, of course, but I just can't imagine. I don't know what version of that would be. Would that be the last version with all that, the after being dragged by the bus? I don't know. But I will say that last version of George, because, you know, he got hit by the bus and then dragged kind of on his face, which was also, that was kind of like the beginning of my love for prosthetics, because I got to work, I got to sit there and watch Tom Flounce was his name? I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Who also worked on Lord of the Rings and with Guillermo del Toro on Hellboy. So as long as I could talk, it was, and it didn't have a covering my mouth, I, you know, riddled him with questions. And it's just so fascinating to watch them, because you just don't get that opportunity, especially in a filmed performance, either television or film. You don't get to sit there and watch someone else create. And build and build and build and build, and that's very exciting for me. So that was the first time. But anyway, what was my story? Oh, getting back to, so he got hit, right, and he passed away, and then there's elevators open, and I love that this is a little window into Shonda's obvious brilliance that that was filmed after we had wrapped. So it was done in secret with like this, what do you call it, a blank crew, a very small crew.
Skeleton crew?
Skeleton crew, thank you. And originally the doors had opened, they had filmed it so they had opened on Denny, Jeffrey Dean Morgan. But I guess this was the thing all along that nobody knew about, and so the doors, we filmed it, but I had shaved because I had dyed my hair brown for that role, so with all the goop on it and everything like that, that last night I learned a valuable lesson: don't change your look until a few weeks after shooting. But I had shaved my head and shaved the hair off, and so they called and they were like, well, we wanted you to come back because we want to do the elevators opening, you're there. And I was like, do you guys have a wig? Because I don't know what to do. So but then Shonda had this brilliant idea that because he went off to join the army, that he'd be in dress uniform, and then that would be his army haircut, which I think is couldn't have been I don't know, more fitting and beautiful kind of tribute of what George wanted to be, who he wanted to be, who he aspired to be, even though he had all these faults and all these insecurities that that there is a bit of a hero lurking underneath there that he hadn't gotten there in life, but maybe in this whatever imagined afterlife he got there. Anyway, that's a roundabout question, but
that's
our
okay.
answer.
Well, listen, congratulations on Genius. Everybody seems to be watching it these days. I hear so many people talking about it. Can't wait to see how it unfurls the rest of the season.
Oh, well, thank you very much for having me.